Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm excited to get started today. We'll be talking about a just kind of a fundamental topic around RFPs and RFQs. And so we'll dive into that. I like giving just a tip for success for those showing up early and on time as a way to say thank you. I really appreciate it when you do show up early and on time. I do, and it's always cool. So my tip, going back to something I really like a lot, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. It's written by Dr. Stephen Covey, no longer with us, but I've been reading this book since 1997 when I was in the Army and working for the Secretary of the Army. And that book got introduced to us. And one of my favorite things about the book is, in my tip for you, is that it has these 7 habits, right? The 7 habits for highly effective people. It has these 7 habits. And I like taking a habit and trying to focus on it for a week. I'm like, all week long, I'm just reminding myself, am I beginning with the end in mind, for example, is one of the habits. Another habit is sharpen the saw, right? You have to take care of yourself. You stop cutting down the tree for a few minutes so you can sharpen the saw and you can keep cutting the tree down. You will cut the tree down faster. But if you don't take time to take care of the saw or yourself, the habit sharpen the saw talks about you won't be as effective as you can be. So make sure, if you haven't done this, go out, get 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I personally love the audiobook of this because Stephen Covey was reading it, but you feel the emotions and a lot of the stories that go into the habits. That's just a quick tip for success for all of those showing up early and on time. Let me go ahead and get my slides in a row, my ducks in a row here, and we'll be off to the races. And I'm glad you're engaging in chat. Thanks for doing that. Okay, in today's training, I just want to talk about government contracting's just vast amount of terms that they have related to buying and selling, or buying goods, products and services, right? And so the government definitely has a lot of terms they use for what you sell to them. And in today's training, I just want to do a little bit of a dive into two of those terms, RFP and RFQ. So request for proposal and request for quote. And the reason I chose this topic is because it's important to understand how federal buyers decide and when they decide to use an RFP over an RFQ, right? When buying the products or services that you sell. It's a really interesting thing to understand. And knowing this is going to help you understand the sales process, right? How you interact with them during an RFP or an RFQ. And then also it's going to help you really tighten up your response, whether your response leans more heavily on price in there or whether it's on technical approach. And so RFPs and RFQs, knowing these things really help you get started. It's interesting. I've been sharing myself, it looks like. I got to figure this one thing out. Sorry, you would think this is my first training, but it's not. I've done hundreds and hundreds of these. I just forgot to share my screen. But fortunately, I figured it out early on. Let me get to my slides. Let me hide this guy, and I think I'm good to go. So today, let's talk about RFPs versus RFQs, and what is the difference between those two. I want to break the top differences between a federal RFP and RFQ down into 3 categories, and then I'm going to show you some examples of, how do you find these? How do you look at it? So the first thing is I just want to remind you, and really me sometimes, of the terms and how the government procures products and services. So I just want to touch on that. Second thing is I want to dive into RFQ and RFP's comparison, first starting with their purpose. What's the purpose of these, these notice types, if you will, or these solicitation types? And then the second thing is, how are they evaluated? So how are RFPs and RFQs evaluated? And I'll give you a couple of just suggestions on there. And I'm not trying to come at this as if I'm a FAR expert or I'm a contracting officer, right? I'm coming at this from a small business's perspective, a salesperson's perspective, looking at this from that angle. So I'm not diving deep down into trying to share everything about the FAR, but I'm going to hit the high levels of what really is helpful. What I would teach, somebody new to government contracting who's going to work in my company if I was a government contractor, right? This is what I've been teaching them. And then I'm going to wrap up with some examples. I want to dive into SAM and show you. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonough. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce and co-founder of GovCon in a Box. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting, it's not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. That's what I want for you. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the Government Contracting Success newsletter that we put out. We're really proud of this newsletter. It's the largest government contracting newsletter out there by double. And it's because we put out really good content that you and your peers around the federal market value. And then the last thing is on this page, if you haven't signed up for tomorrow's training, then make sure you're registering for tomorrow. It's the Dynamic Small Business Search. This is the #1 market research tool the federal buyers use. This is the tool I've been talking about since 2018. It is the government's tool, but nobody told me when I was a small business owner that I needed to not only keep it up to date, but it's the #1 place to go. Literally this past week, my team and I reached out on behalf of a customer to hundreds of large billion-dollar companies. And so we reached out to hundreds of points of contact from those firms. And many of the people who got back to us, it was so reinforcing for us. Many of them suggested that, hey, not only do you need to be in our portal, if you want to talk to us, et cetera, but make sure you're in DSBS. And that's what tomorrow's training is about. Even the largest use that as a resource to find small businesses. And so it can't just be a check mark. It really needs to be seen as the most important marketing research tool for not just the government, but for you, right? It's your #1 market asset. Okay, so, one other thing, I want to just congratulate all of the companies that are in the 100 Club. There's like over 350,000 small businesses registered to sell to the federal government, right? I was just literally looking with somebody this morning, and there's like 377,000. And so this is a huge amount, but most of us are invisible. Easily 70% of us are invisible to federal buyers, either because we don't have the right information or because we're not telling our story about how great we are. We do all this work over here, but we don't put it into the tools where federal buyers look. And so we just get passed by when they're looking for a company that has experience. They go, oh, you don't have experience. It's like, yes, we do. Well, if you're not telling people, you're invisible. And so we created this thing called the Federal Visibility Score, where we look at where the buyers are looking and we say, how visible are you on a scale of 1 to 100? These 78 companies have a 100 score. And I'm really proud of them because they all came in and worked hard. Some of them were at a higher number and went to 100. Some of them started at like 4 or 19. And within a week or two on their own, just with some guidance from me, it's all video and inside of GovCon in a Box, they were able to raise it up. So go to GovCon in a Box to check it out. Congratulations to Wes from Hex 5 Digital for pushing his company up in the past couple of days. Tony from Sansar Tech and Shaban from PAI. These 3 companies are the newest ones since yesterday. So I'm really proud of them. Give a little shout out if you see them in here. If you're in the 100 Club, put into the chat, I'm in the 100 Club. Okay, so let's talk about how buyers buy, right? I mean, from a high level. If you join in a few minutes late, shame on, no. If you're joining a few minutes late, I want to remind you, I speak from a small business owner's perspective and from a salesperson's perspective. I'm not trying to speak from the FAR perspective or a legal or a contracting officer. I'm not trying to go into that level of depth. I'm trying to go into enough depth that I would be teaching a brand new business developer or salesperson in your company how to understand sales. And so when you think about how the government buys what you sell, these are several of the ways I just wanted to either tell you about or remind you about and to kind of think about where they fit into your agenda and strategy as you go forward into 2025. So the first one, and I'm sorry I didn't number these, that would have been handy, but the first one is request for proposals, right? And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But for the most part, this is, and I tried to put a how is it evaluated to a degree. So requests for proposals or RFPs, these tend to be evaluated on your technical approach, right? And what you can offer to the government's needs. The second one, request for quote, this is a little different. It tends to be focused more on price. So RFP and RFQ, a little spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about this. RFPs tend to be more about the technical approach, how you can solve the problem. And request for quote is more about what's your price to do it. And I put LPTA here on RFQs because often you'll see LPTAs used in a quote because the government kind of has a pretty darn good idea of not only what they need, but how that need can be met. And so they're looking at more price. I'll talk more about that in a second. Requests for bids. This is, this is just me saying this, but imagine if they wanted a whole bunch of pens or a whole bunch of, Adobe licenses or something. They put out a request for a bid. This is often you hear about sealed bids or things like that. You just bid it in like eBay to a degree, not really, but it's all about price, right? There could be this one-off exception, but invitation for bid, the next one down, and request for bid, these are about price. The government is saying, I want cups. I want a lot of cups. How much? So you can think about all that stuff that happened during COVID and all the companies that came up and started selling, I think it was PPE, personal protection equipment, the masks, the clothes and gloves, all that stuff. That was all in the the quotes, the bids, the invitation for bid, because there's no real debate upon it. They just need to have the product, right? And so that's RFB and IFB, or request for bid and invitation for bid. As you come down, there's another one called request for tender. And candidly, I have never heard that term before, but it made sense the minute I saw it, right? I was doing some of the research for you. I play mostly in the RFP world. I really never even played much in the other worlds. I don't do LPTA. But request for tender, it's again strictly price, but the difference that I look at from from a request for a bid is a request for a bid tends to be lower level amounts under simplified acquisition type stuff. So under $250,000 thresholds. Request for tender tends to be a little larger. It's still strictly about price, or for the very most part about price. But it's larger. What I put there was larger requests for bids are called requests for tenders. The next one, and the second from the bottom, is called NOFOs, Notice for Funding Opportunity, Notice of Funding Opportunity. And this is for grants or I can't remember the other term. Oh, I just realized, again, I'm not sharing. I'm sorry. And I'm sure somebody's saying, hey, you're not sharing, darn it. Hold on. Apologize for it, but here's the things. Hopefully you're following along. But here's the slide I was just talking off of, so you can see me going down the bullets. So the notice of funding opportunities, basically it's grants, right? And then the last one is broad agency announcements, or BAA. And this is mostly research and development, right? So how they evaluate it is mostly based on the research and development side of your response more than the price. So you can think of all the cyber stuff that's out there at the moment. There's topics that are out there, and I think they have those announcements as well. So these are just some of the ways that the government procures. Think about kind of the way they go out and solicit the products and services that they need from you and for other companies like that. So I'm going to dive into the top two: request for proposal and request for quote. By the way, after this training, I'll try to grab this and throw it in the comments, unless somebody wants to take a screenshot and type it into comments really quick. That's always helpful, but it's gone. Okay, so let's talk about RFPs versus RFQs from a purpose standpoint. When I talk about purpose, it's really the government has a need, right? And so these two different documents really truly are used when the need is less or well known. So the first thing, RFP, I say this is when they're looking for you to talk to them about your approach, right? And I think I'll dive more into it in the next slide. But they have a known need, a problem, or a goal, and but they're not quite sure on the approach, et cetera. And so when the government is looking for more than just pricing, but they're looking for information on how that work will be performed, or how they should be thinking about it beyond an RFI, right? They want you to come in and talk to them about your approach. Contrast that with an RFQ, which is really mostly about a quick price-focused response, right? That's why I said earlier on the slide before this one is that RFPs are about the technical approach and RFQs are more about the price, right? And that's where you think LPTAs fit in there. And so RFQs, similar to what I said about request for invitation or invitation to bid, RFQs tend to be for smaller, less complex procurements, and they fall into the simplified acquisition. I didn't go too far into this training, but you can actually look into SAM and USA Spending FPDS and look at their data. And one of the ways you can find the difference between these is by the FAR clauses they use. So often the RFQs they have a FAR clause, and I can't remember what number it is. It might be 15 if I got my memory good. And I never want to actually be good at memorizing FAR clauses. That's too complex. But RFQs, they'll have this FAR clause in there typically that is around the simplified acquisition procedure. That's the FAR thing I'm talking about. And a similar thing with RFPs, it has another FAR clause. So you can learn more about that. But for the most part, you just want to understand the purpose of an RFP. In my words, the purpose of an RFP is for you to tell me how you're going to solve my problem in a way that I go, I see that. Price seems fair. Let me award it to you. RFQ is when I want you to sit there and show to me, and I think I can say this on the next slide in a minute, but I want you to show me you got a handle on the need that I have and how you're going to deliver it. But really, you're giving me the best price. That's what I'm looking for there. And so just keep that in mind. In a minute, I'm going to talk about how they evaluate and from a very high level. Before I do, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already registered, make sure you go to, you can do this on LinkedIn. I just created a very easy link for you so I could remember, frankly. Go to govconinAbox.com/networking. And on there, we have a button. When you click on it, you can go register, right? But register for our networking event. We got almost 200 people already registered for this virtual networking event. It's free. It's on Monday. And come on in. We did a test one in September, and it went off flawlessly. It was amazing. And so we're really excited about doing that and bringing a couple of hundred people together and to be able to help you network with others who are in the GovCon space. And so make sure you go register for that if you're looking to grow your network and meet other people. Okay, so let's talk about the RFP and RFQ from an evaluation standpoint. I alluded to this a little bit already, but in RFPs, when the government has got this need, this requirement, right, that they're putting out, they want us to address as industry, RFPs, requests for proposals, it really is about the technical approach. That's why I say technical approach is key. I like to say when you write a proposal, you should make it clear, compliant, compelling, and convincing. Clear is just plain language. It's easy for them to read and understand. Compliant means you're addressing everything they say must be in a response. Generally, people call this a shall exercise. Wherever the government says shall, you should. And so those two are hopefully pretty clear. The compelling and convincing, which is what I put here, really relate to your technical approach. Your compelling response and proposal to the government is, look, I hear your need. I understand it. And this is how we're going to come in and do it and knock it out of the park. I'm always looking for, how do I give you exactly what you need and then go way above that, right? And so I'm compelling. The problem with compelling is, like, imagine me being the buyer. I'm like, wow, Joe, you convinced me. I like what you're saying. This is super exciting. I can see it. It's amazing. How do I know you're going to be able to deliver it? You have convinced me that it's exciting, but can you convince me that you'll be able to deliver it? And so the last part of the proposal, convincing, is where not only you're backing it up with past performances, but with stories, and the language and the approach that you're talking about really begins to show them that you are able to deliver it. And so RFPs, you're really trying for that technical approach. A couple of other things that are in RFPs that you want to pay attention to, that the government also pays attention to. It's called a management approach, just loosely. You got a lot of different terms around there, but I'm just using management approach as an example. This is where, how are you going to manage the 5-year contract if I give it to you? How are you going to maintain it as a program manager or project manager? How are you going to handle the staffing side, the quality side? All this kind of activity that is not necessarily the boots in the ground, dirty type of work, getting your hands dirty work, but that management approach, the government really needs to know that you're going to be able to manage a contract. This includes doing invoicing and getting paid and paying your team and all that stuff. If you work with subcontractors, right? How are you going to manage them so that they never get mad at you and leave, and then you're leaving the government in a hole? So when you talk about a management approach, it too should be clear, compliant, compelling, and convincing, right? It doesn't have to be just this boring thing. It should be a section that you're convincing the government about your approach. And then the next one, past performance. I hope most of us understand that, but this is where you bring your experience in. This is really a big portion of convincing, obviously, is where you're saying, we've done this before, and I'm showing you we've done it. And then the last one is price, right? And so I put price down there on purpose because for the most part, requests for proposals, the price is the least important. Sometimes you'll literally see in the evaluation criteria of an RFP that the government will sit there and say the management approach and your technical approach together far outweigh the price. Yes, we need a good price, but we're not going to award a contract to the lowest price. We're going to award a contract collectively to the firm that brings us what we need in a way that we can see it's going to address our mission, our requirements. Okay, so that's RFP, right? The technical approach is key. RFQs, this is where the evaluation criteria really just goes into price. I'm sending over a quote. Sometimes I send over an RFQ response, a quote, and it is 5 or 10 pages because they do require, even though I wish they wouldn't, and simplified acquisition generally means also trying to simplify the amount of pages we have to write. Sometimes they'll make us submit more, but we're really not trying to convince them of anything except for, yes, they're technically acceptable. It's not so much weighing whether you're better or worse than the other people. And the last one is price, right? I put here, but price is key for RFQs. And so for the most part, if the government gets 10 proposals or 10 responses to an RFQ and 8 of them are technically acceptable, then it goes right to the price, right? It's a pretty clear way that they evaluate you. Fortunately, in the federal government, they for the most part, right? Let's always talk about the most part. I don't care about exceptions. For the most part, the government is incredibly fair. They're really clear in the RFP and the RFQ. This is how we're going to evaluate your response back to us. And so you want to make sure, first off, that you even understand, am I looking at an RFP that I'm responding to, an RFQ, and which is more important, right? And you can look at the evaluation criteria of either of these and see that. One quick side tip is that if you're looking at recompetes, and if you watch yesterday's training, you saw me say that recompetes are the easiest contracts to win. If you're looking at recompetes, you want to know this information about, is it an RFP or an RFQ last time? Because it helps you really start planning the questions you ask the customer during the sales period or capture, right? It also helps you really get started early on the response. Okay, I want to just show you a couple of quick examples on SAM, just, as you look at this. First off, when you think about going into sam.gov, it's funny. It's not like there's a field that says, is this an RFQ or an RFP? There are ways to look at it, but even sometimes you go in there, you're still a little confused because it seems like every agency and every buyer within every agency does it a little differently. There is no one exact way. So an example is an RFP can have a P or an R in the solicitation ID, or it can say RFP at the beginning. So it can say RFP such and such in the solicitation ID, or somewhere in the middle, it might have a P for Papa or R for Romeo, or proposal, right? Or response. That's what those stand for, is proposal and response. So it can have those in there, but it can have other things, right? I've seen it where I look at it, I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And when you target your agencies, make sure you know how they do it. I don't need to know how the entire federal government does it or every contracting officer. I need to know my target agency. How do you guys do it? What is your standardization? Because there's a lot better chance that they're all doing it pretty similar. And then the last one is RFQs. In that solicitation ID, typically it has an RFQ or more usually a Q right in the middle. And I'll show you that right now, actually. So I'm just coming over to SAM. I'm going to search. If you haven't done this a lot, I'm going to all domains here and changing it to search contract opportunities. And then I'm going to zoom in for us for a second, just so you can see. I'm coming down here and I'm saying the response date is due in the next month, just to give us a limited amount of opportunities. SAM, this part of SAM is really good. It just keeps in real time, really fast, changing the data, which I like, right? So there's 6,400 opportunities. Now I'm going to come down here to the notice type, and I'm going to say, show me combined synopsis and solicitations, and I can say solicitations as well. So now it was 6,400, and now we're at 4,320. I don't think there's anything else I care about at the moment. I might, if I have time, I might show you something else. But really, all I was trying to do is come over here and show you that it's funny. The very first one I'm looking at, I'm like, you know what? I'm not totally sure as you come down. But you can start seeing, that's funny, a lot of this began to change. So you look at these solicitation IDs and you can see the lettering, right? And for me, DLA, I would be wanting to figure out, let me get past DLA. Oh, come on, DLA, you're killing me. DLA, I'm sure somebody will tell me really quick, these characters mean something, but it doesn't fit well into my training. Let me just switch over to, actually, let me change this to IT. Hold on one second. Let me just come down here to, where's my guy? There he is, 7. All right, let me just take IT management, see if they got a lot. They don't. It's funny. I tried to share it down. It's not sharing enough for me. And so I just keep trying different ways. By the way, this is live, right? I could have lined up exact tips on it, but let me do this instead, just RFP as an example. So if I do RFP, right, and I come in, this is where I can see, like right here, where it's got that R in the middle. It's got the R. So beginning to learn how these people do stuff. Some of them, super nice. They put it right in the title, right? But I can tell because there's an R. If I'm going to do a lot of work with Defense Health Agency, then I start seeing more of what's going on there. I can do the same thing as I come down. So if I scrolled, let me just scroll a whole bunch really quick. This one's interesting though. I typed in RFP, but this guy's got a Q, right? So, and I know that bearings, this is a part, it's a product. It should be a quote. I don't know why it has an RFP, which is an interesting thing. I don't have time to look at it. But what I want you to do is to come in here on your own agency and you can type in RFP, but more importantly, filter it down by your agency. So let's just do Homeland Security like this. So if I go into Homeland Security, I can see there's a quote there. The next one here, it's services, and I can see there's an R for proposal, right? And so that's what I want you to kind of just track on as you look at opportunities in SAM. Most importantly, though, as you move forward, you want to pay attention to, I want to give you 3 reminders. I'm going to start at the bottom since I'm on that thread. Third suggestion for you is make sure you understand which thing is used more for what you sell, right? If you're selling parts, it's pretty clear you're going to be doing not RFPs, right? You're not going to be doing response for proposal. But you'll be doing RFQs or invitation for bids or whatever. But what does the government use most for what you sell? What about if you do services like help desk, right? Do they treat that more like a quote or do they do it as a proposal? Go find out from your small business specialist at your target agency, your local PTACs, et cetera. These people can tell you. The other 2 things I wanted to remind you is just the difference between RFQ and RFP. RFQ, in my words, is that the government has a pretty good idea of what they need, right? They're pretty lockstep on their requirements. And they have a general idea of what they need to get from you. So they're just looking for a quote, RFQ. The RFP means they need an approach. They know they have a problem or a goal, but they're not really sure how to address it. That's where you come in. You're providing that proposal, that technical approach. And so that's what they're looking for. Hopefully you found this valuable. If you did, put RFP or RFQ into the chat, whichever one you do more of. RFP or RFQ rocks. Just put that in there and let me know you were tracking on this. Don't forget to register for the training. It's govconinAbox.com/networking. We'll give you the links to go register. And the last thing is just remember, government contracting, like all this stuff I'm showing you on RFPs and RFQs, it's not a secret. It's just a process. And when you learn the process, you begin to demystify it. So hopefully I did a little bit of that for you today. I will see you at the next training tomorrow. Hopefully, for sure, I'll see you Monday at the networking event.